Hi, here we are today with romance writer Meghann Whistler, and she has two love-inspired books out. One coming out this month, and another one. Plus, she does some indie writing. So, Meghann, why don't you introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about you?
Hi, everybody, and thanks, Jennifer, for having me. This is exciting. So yeah, I write Christian romance novels. My new one, The Baby's Christmas Blessing, just came out at the end of September, and it's set on Cape Cod, as is my first book. I went to college and lived in Massachusetts for 9 years. So I've been to Cape Cod a lot and it's really beautiful. So it's fun to revisit it on the page.
Wonderful. And I was thinking it was coming out this month. So that's kind of early for a Christmas novella or a Christmas novel to come out, isn't it? In September? Is that typical?
I guess they start putting them out in September.
Wow.
It seems early to me because I usually don't start getting into the Christmas thing until after Thanksgiving, but my editor said that Christmas novels sell better in the fall. So there you go.
Well, and all, they have all the Christmas decorations out already, so why not?
That's true.
We can't even get to through Halloween anymore. So Meghann, tell us a little bit about yourself. I got to read your blurb because when I went on your website, I actually giggled because it was just really cute the way you have that. It's a very simple website, easy to navigate, really clean. So, but the About Me page, it was very cute. It says, when I'm not writing, reading, or jamming out to Christian rock, you can find me enjoying a relaxing evening with my rocket scientist husband. Seriously, he's a real live rocket scientist, or playing with my three kids. So tell us a little bit about your life other than the writing life for you.
Sure. Well, I've been married for 16 years now. My husband and I met on a blind date in Boston.
Oh, really?
Yes. So the friend who set us up was very proud of herself. I think we were the first blind date couple that worked out for
How
her as a
funny.
matchmaker. So that was neat. And actually, I remember calling her the next day and, being like, oh, he's so nice. And she was really surprised that we hit it off. Not that she didn't think he was a nice guy, but, blind dates don't tend to work out. So it was a good surprise for her and for me and for my husband.
Usually that's a setup for disaster.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
so what were you doing? Did you say you were in college? You were in school?
I was actually finishing up graduate school. I have a master's of fine arts in creative writing. So I was in my last semester of graduate school and he was working as a research scientist at MIT at that time.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So
He
you think
really
of a
is a
writer and a
rocket
rocket
scientist.
scientist.
Yeah.
These two things do not go together, but
I hear you. How
we
funny.
complement each other really well. And we actually both are from Canada. So we had that in common right off the bat, which was nice.
Oh, wow. So, wow, what are the chances of that?
I know.
Is that why your friend set you up? Because she knew you were both from Canada? Was that part of the plan?
No, she set us up because she was a little bit older than us. She was about 10 years older. And I'd gone to a party and some of her older friends were talking to me and she was like, oh no, this will not do. She was like, I know someone around your age. So that's why she set us up.
How cute. And you
Yeah.
have three kids. What are their ages and their names?
We do. We have three boys. We have our oldest is 11. His name is Chris. And then we have a 9-year-old Owen and a 7-year-old Jeremy.
Wow. I have a Chris too. I have a Chris son and a Chris husband.
Oh, neat.
I know. So
Good name.
three kids. How do you tell us about your writing? How you write around all that?
Well, it's a little easier now that they're all in elementary school full time. When I started writing Christian romance, I think it was back in 2018. And so the little guy was only 2-3 years old. So he was home with me full time.
Wow.
So that was a challenge. I would write just for like a half an hour to an hour at a time when he was taking a nap, or I would often, we had a YMCA down the block and the YMCA has a childcare room. So I would go, I would exercise for, 45 minutes and you can leave the kids in the babysitting room for up to 2 hours. So I would exercise a little bit, and then I would take my computer and sit in the lobby and I would write for about an hour. So that's how I wrote my first book, or my first published book, Falling for the Innkeeper, was just in those little snippets of time when the kids were napping or at the babysitting room at the YMCA.
So Falling for the Innkeeper, remind me, because I know you have 2 love inspired and you have 1 self-published. Is the Falling for the Innkeeper is love inspired, right?
Yes, that's right.
And so is the Baby's Christmas Blessing, which is the one that just came out.
Yes, they're both Harlequin love inspired books.
And where did you get your ideas for those 2 books?
Well, the first one, I started with the setting, actually. My grandparents, my mother's parents, owned an inn on Cape Cod, and we would go every summer for vacation. So when I was thinking about, yes, it was really nice.
That sounds like a dream.
Yes, it was beautiful. And my mom has 4 siblings, so there were a lot of cousins. So we'd get to play with the cousins every summer, and that was a lot of fun. But so when I was thinking about, starting this new book and trying this new genre, I was thinking, where do I want this to take place? And I really, my grandparents have since passed away, and I just really felt like I wanted to go back and sort of visit them and visit that inn again. So I set the story at an inn that's similar to my grandparents, although the one in the book is a lot more run down than the one in real life. So that's kind of where that idea came from. It was really just that I wanted to honor that setting, and the story took off from there.
So remind me, I just want to make sure I got this right, because I probably don't. I looked at so many blurbs. Sometimes I get my stories mixed up, and age is a real thing. Your brain starts kind of a little bit. But if I remember correctly, the Innkeeper book, you have it's a girl, a young woman who has this inn, and it needs some work, and somebody wants to buy it. And so the male character that comes in ends up helping her out, even though he's supposed to be the one navigating the cell. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes.
Okay. And the Baby's Christmas Blessing. Tell us what that one's about and how you worked that one.
So that one is also set on Cape Cod, and the heroine of that story is the best friend of the heroine from Falling for the Innkeeper. So the Baby's Christmas Blessing, I really started with that character because I enjoyed her a lot in Falling for the Innkeeper. I really like quirky characters and characters who have a sense of humor, and she made me laugh. So I wanted to give her a happily ever after.
Nice.
So this one's set on Cape Cod. There's a little bit of the story that takes place at the same inn, but it's not the focus of the book the same way the first one was.
Right.
So this one it's a second chance story. So it's about her short-lived teenage camp boyfriend coming back into her life with his newborn nephew. And he needs a nanny. So of course, things happen. So that's what this one's about.
It sounds like a fun story. There was a movie on, gosh, I don't know how many years ago it was, and it was with Katherine Heigl, and she ends up. Do you see that movie? She ends up with her best friend and her the male character's best friend were best friends, but this guy's kind of a mess up, and they end up with a baby. The parents die, they get killed, and they'd left this baby to the 2 of these who cannot even be in the same room without totally losing it. And it makes for a very it kind of reminded me of your story a little bit, where you have these characters, but they can't stand each other. And so it's quite an interesting story. It was pretty funny. It was actually a very good movie.
Cute.
Or a fun, I think of them as like a Hallmarkish type love stories that they're going to end. Of course, they're going to end the way they're going to end, because what love story doesn't? There's no point, right?
Right.
And but it's all that conflict that's in there that I think really sets up a story to make it good, and then to learn something through that. So yours are love inspired. So is there a Christian message woven in your stories?
Yes, there is always. I really I started writing Christian romance because I was reading a lot of Christian romance, and I felt really the stories just gave me a lot of hope. So it was important to me when I set out on this writing journey to try to do the same thing for other people. So just to give people a feel-good story that also leaves them feeling a little bit closer to God.
That's nice. There's a message woven in woven in there that they can appreciate as well, which I think is really important. So tell us a little bit about your writing schedule. People always ask me, what is your writing schedule like? What do you do? People are just curious.
Sure. Well, I write when my kids are at school. So usually I'll drop them off, and then I typically go to the gym or go for a walk, and then maybe could do some grocery shopping and clean up around the house. So I would say on a typical day, I get 2 or 3 hours of solid writing in before I have to go and pick them up from school. So yeah, it's good. Some days are a little easier, some days are slower. So
Yeah. So do you have like a
it
word
depends.
count that you like to reach? Do you have a typical word count you strive for each day?
Yeah, I mean, I like to hit 1,000 words. It doesn't always happen. And if I have a 2,000 word day, I'm like, yes.
So Love
uh,
Inspired are typically how many words in a Love Inspired?
they're about 55,000 words.
Okay, so
So
they're a
a
little
little
bit
bit longer than a novella, a little bit shorter than a trade
novel.
novel.
Okay, perfect. And then you have one book you indie published. Tell us about that one.
That one is a billionaire story, a Christian billionaire story. So it is about a he's sort of a healthcare billionaire. And he came into his money very recently within the last 2 years. And then he has been diagnosed with a pretty bad health problem. So he's sort of struggling with the idea that maybe he's not going to have this life that he thought he was going to have because of his health. And, thinking that he waited too long to, find love and get married and have children. And his business partners encourage him to go to a wilderness camp for people with, illness and disability. And so kind of kicking and screaming, he goes, and he meets a woman who's there with her mother who has cancer. And so it's sort of about how the two of them get together.
You connect. And how much research do you have to do for these stories? Do you do a lot of research? Do you make it up and just do a lot of Google, or how? I mean, Cape Cod, obviously you had some research there. You lived it, which makes it much easier.
Yes. I do research. I mean, especially about the hero's health problem in the indie book. I did a lot of research for that. And for the baby's Christmas blessing, I did a bunch of research on what happens when a baby's single parent dies. How does custody work in that case, just to make sure that everything was authentic. So I spoke to a DCFS lawyer, just to make sure that that I'd gotten things right for that.
Yeah, because it can change state by state as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Where are you located?
We're in Texas now.
Oh, really? Okay. So, but your stories are taking place in Cape Cod. Where did the billionaire story take place?
That one took place partly in Boston and partly in Vermont.
Okay, so you like the East Coast, don't you?
I do. I have very fond memories of living in Massachusetts and New England.
Yeah, I have a family up in Maine, so we've been out there quite a bit. Boston is a beautiful city.
Yes.
It's a beautiful
Yes.
city, especially if you want to do the Freedom Trail. Yeah, it's a beautiful city. So, okay, so what other things can you share? I mean, you have your stories. One of them you indie published. Maybe tell the difference between, there are a lot of indie published authors out there. So are you having to do a lot of marketing? How does that play out in your day to day?
Yes, I mean, it's different for sure. I think with Love Inspired, when you're working with a traditional publisher, especially like Harlequin, where they have a very big reader base,
Mhm.
it's you don't have to do as much marketing or selling, and your book will still sell, because they put these books in, every Walmart in the country. So your book's going to sell kind of regardless of whether you have an email list, regardless of whether you have a social media presence. So for that, I was really fortunate, and that Harlequin picked up my first book, because that's sort of how I got my reader base, was people who love the Love Inspired books found me through Love Inspired.
That's how Nora Roberts got started.
Mm-hmm.
And look how big she became.
Right. So that was pretty nice. And then, so publishing independently is a very different ball game. You have a lot more control over really every aspect of it. The story, you pick your own editor, you pay for your own editor.
Right.
I picked the cover designer, and then, really chose the cover model. So we have a lot more input on the cover. You choose the title, you write the blurb. So everything. But then, getting that book in front of readers is a much bigger challenge. So, that was really, I did a lot of research into, how to get an independently published book in front of people, and, what will make people take a chance on an author they've never heard of, and pick up that book and be willing to pay a little bit of money for that book. So,
well, it doesn't hurt that you have the Love Inspired, because you have a name for yourself there, so you can launch from that, correct?
Yeah, a little bit.
So were the Love Inspired books first, or was the Billionaire book first?
My first Love Inspired book came out in July of 2020. And then I wrote the Billionaire book after that, and that came out in September of 2021. And then the next Love Inspired book just came out. So the indie book was kind of in between my two Love Inspired books.
Nice. So it just sounds like you are enjoying the writing journey. And any trouble coming up with story ideas? Do you feel like when I write I get an idea for a story when I start my story, and I find that even if I semi-map it out, because I'm a planner, if I semi-map that out, God will always bring in a character that was unexpected, that always plays an intricate part of the faith message that I was not even planning on having in there, and it flows in there. And I know that's why I know I'm not writing these books on my own. Do you have those kinds of experiences at all?
Well, I don't plan very much at all.
You're a seat of the pantser.
Oh yeah, gosh. I'm a character-driven writer, so I usually start with the characters, and they will kind of lead me down this winding path. And they usually surprise me. So
you ever run into where you write yourself into a corner?
I have written myself into places where I'm not sure how things are going to work out until snap, something clicks, and then I know how to move forward. I think where I get stuck is if and as you said earlier, conflict's really important, and having a lot of conflict and a lot of tension makes the story interesting. So, if the story's not working well, it's usually because I haven't set up the conflict. I haven't given them enough, conflicting goals. So sometimes I'll have to go back and write that in, and then I can move forward from there. So I'm definitely not one of those writers who writes the first draft in one go and then goes back and edits. I'm editing all the time. Every day I go back and edit what I've already written and then move forward from there.
Well, I do that as well, just because I can't. It's not that I'm editing the story as much as just editing, period. But do you find that you have to go back then? Deborah Rainey, do you know who she is?
Yes.
Yeah, she says she's she's kind of a pantser. She does a little bit of structure and then a seat of the pantser. But then a lot of times you find that you're doing a lot more content editing because you have to go back and make everything match up. Do you find that to be true for you?
With my first book, for sure. And that's where I was really fortunate to have my editor from Love Inspired, because she really helped me understand, the beats of a romance story,
Right.
which, I'd read romance, but I didn't really necessarily understand exactly the inner workings. So I think I rewrote that first book almost entirely twice, before it was published. But once I understood, the story beats, the next two books came a lot easier. So, The Billionaire's Secret, which actually I wrote after I wrote The Baby's Christmas Blessing, even though it came out a year
Oh,
before.
yeah.
I didn't really have to do any content editing for that. I think I removed a scene in the middle, and that was about the extent of the content editing for that one. Because I just understood the how to plot a romance novel so
Right.
much better by that point.
So you said you have a degree in creative writing.
Yes.
So how does that play into your ability to write? I mean, I know one other person. I have a virtual assistant who is getting her master's in creative writing as well. But what is it that you learned? Because my master's is in education. I was a middle school teacher for years. And so I had a psychology degree and a master's in education. And I see how that played in for me to be able to get into character heads, to see how characters relate, what things trip them up. With your degree in creative writing, how does that play into your writing, and what is it that you take away from a degree such as that?
Well, that's a good question. And it's interesting because I got my degree back in 2003, so it was a long time in
Been a few
between.
years, huh?
Yes, so it was a long time from the time that I graduated until I published my first book. It was 17 years.
Wow.
So, and yeah, actually, after I got my MFA, I worked in software marketing for a long time. So I was writing case studies and white papers for a software company. So I definitely used my writing skills, but
Right.
not in the way that I get to use them now writing Christian romance, which is a lot more fun than writing my papers.
Probably a little more creative than the
Yes.
technical papers.
Yes, but it's interesting, thinking back on my experience with the MFA, mine was a lot more focused on literary fiction than commercial fiction like romance. So, we focused a lot on writing craft versus sort of like plot or
Right.
things like that. So,
Which is important too. I mean, you need to have that, there's that age-old argument, character versus plot. And in my way of thinking, you better have both if you're going to have a really good story.
Right.
So,
Yes.
But and when you're talking about in your degree, it was more of a literary type when you're looking at literary works. And how does that play into your story? I mean, I'm sure you use that in your descriptions and in all that as well, right?
I do. And, I really love writing. It sounds really cheesy, but I just
No.
love the
Why would
act
you
of,
do that if you don't love it, right?
right, exactly. I just love the act of like putting words on paper, and if they really speak to me or, speak to someone else, it just brings me like joy. So, I think that's really, the MFA really helped me to sort of hone that. And, and also you do a lot of critiquing in MFA programs. So you see a lot of other people's writing and what works and what doesn't. And so you learn from that as well. But yeah, it was a great experience. I enjoyed my graduate program more than college. So I'm
Understandably.
really thankful for the experience that I had there.
So when you create your characters then, and you said you like quirky, fun characters. When you create your characters, how do you keep them fresh? Like I use Enneagram. to go back in with that psychology thing, you tend to gravitate toward the book education part of it. How do you decide how your characters are going to be, and how do you keep them maybe true to who they should be given their personality, like their responses and maybe even their conflicts, because we all have an internal conflict of some sort from some brokenness.
Right. Yeah, I don't have anything that formal. I really just try to think through their backstory as I go along, and think about how that would play into who they are now, in the present, in the story, and how that would inform their choices and their behavior.
Right. And do you do any pre-writing of the backstory? Like I know backstory is supposed to come in organically. It's supposed to happen as it goes without it info dumping, which is so important. I tend to sometimes forget that I have the backstory in my brain and you're bringing it out to your characters. And sometimes you need to be able to put that in a way that your reader understands it, but you're not giving it all away. So I
Right.
will tend to write up I write in the first person anyway, but I will tend to write up an autobiography, like nothing really long, but and it gets me in, because now I'm doing Southern fiction. I was doing books set in Northern California, where my grandparents actually retired too, and I spent my
Oh,
summer
neat.
in Apple Hill in Northern California. Well, then I shifted. My new series is all Southern fiction, so it's a different cadence in the voice. It's a different tone. It's a different everything. It moves slower, and you have more, I think, creative ways of expressing, that's because really there are a lot of idioms here that are so different from being in California. So when you're creating all this and you need to have these personalities, so do you have an autobiography that you write that you use in order to bring it into your story, or do you just keep it all in the back of your mind?
I will usually start with a few bullet points, so not as thorough as an autobiography, but I have some ideas, and then it will kind of come out more as I write. And that's another benefit of sort of editing as I go, is as I learn more about the characters, I can go back and sort of weave things in earlier if I need to.
Absolutely. And so I'm assuming, since you went into the idea of a graduate degree in writing has always been, when did you get it in your heart that you wanted to be a writer? Like I was 12 when I knew I wanted to be a writer. How old were you when you figured out this is what you wanted to do?
Oh my goodness. I'm not sure. I was writing stories by 5th grade. And definitely by high school, I knew that was kind of my passion. And in college, I got to take some screenwriting classes, and I did take a novel writing class, which I loved. So I had started a novel, and I finished that one in graduate school. Although it wasn't a romance, and it wasn't Christian. And this was again back in the early 2000s, before agents accepted emails or publisher accepted emails. So I was mailing out that manuscript to different people all over the country. So that one did not get published, but it was a good learning experience.
Nothing's wasted.
And it was I'd had my 3rd child, and I quit my marketing job because it was just too much to have 3 kids at home and a full-time job. So I had kind of been home with them for, probably about a year after I quit the job. And I just felt like, I needed something for me, something that I was doing just for me. And so I, like I said, I'd been reading a lot of Christian romance novels, and I thought, I think I could probably write one of those. So that was sort of how I got started on this genre in particular.
And that's, have you ever thought about branching out to a different genre, or is that just place?
No, I really love the Christian romance novels. Romance novels are fun to write because, especially as someone who does not plot out ahead of time,
you know how it's going to end.
So, you're working towards this beautiful, happy ending. So that's fun. And, I enjoy the Christian romance novels for a whole bunch of different reasons, but one is when I started writing it, I was just thinking, if I was writing some other kind of romance novel, I wouldn't be able to tell anybody because I would be embarrassed. The
So,
Christian romance novels,
yeah,
they're not sexy.
right,
So,
right,
I
right,
can
right,
tell my
right.
parents, I can tell my friends,
Clean. Absolutely. You want to keep it clean.
yes.
Yes.
So, that's nice. And I find that having a spiritual arc for the characters just gives the book a lot more depth.
Well,
So
I think that's so
I
important.
enjoy that part too.
Well, that's partly, I mean, don't you feel like that part of your writing is sharing the gospel in a way? So what you write, I'm assuming you're writing for the glory of God. He gave you the gift, now you give it back to him.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it's without that arc, how are you writing to his glory if you're not bringing him to the forefront of the story at some point?
Right. Hmm.
So were you raised in a Christian home?
Yes, I was, but it wasn't super Christian. um, we went to church and that was kind of how I was brought up.
Right.
It wasn't like we talked about God every day or that we prayed every day or things like that. So it was, more like God was there, but it wasn't necessarily like the center of our family life. And so I kind of came to like have that deeper relationship with God um, more in my 20s and 30s. And right before I started writing this, actually, I'd kind of been going through a difficult season in my life, which was why I was reading all these Christian romance novels because
Get some fun out of
um,
your life.
yeah, they give you a little break from, the worries and the stress.
Right, right.
So I really felt like, at that point in my life, and I honestly, I didn't even know there was such a thing as Christian fiction until 2017. Like
Oh,
I had
really?
never read a Christian novel. I didn't know that was a genre. I kind of stumbled across these books because I was going to a program at church and I, typed in like Christian books and I found a novel and I read it and I was like, oh, this was really good. Like I want to read some more of this. So that's how I started reading Christian fiction.
How
And
funny.
um, so once I started reading the Christian romance novels, I just felt like, oh, this is, I love reading them, and I really felt like I could give that same little bit of hope to someone
Right.
else
Good.
through my writing. So it was really, I felt like it was just like God sort of led me to that
Right.
point
You had a
and
plan.
gave me these books right when I needed them.
Well, isn't that always? It's his timing is so perfect. So do you go to the writers' conferences? Do you have a critique group? Do anything outside of on your own?
I have been to a writers conference. I actually went to the American Christian Fiction
Okay.
Writers Conference in 2019. And that's I found an agent, and that's how I got my first contract with Harlequin. I haven't been since COVID, but
Awesome.
I'm really hooked into all the writing groups on Facebook and I met a critique partner on Facebook who's developed into a good friend. So I feel like I have a lot of online connections and
Right.
I would love to go back to in person maybe next year. I'll get to do that again. It was really a special experience getting to meet so many writers and um, learn from them and worship with them
Right.
and celebrate with them. So that was
Yeah,
a wonderful thing.
that's exciting. Yeah, I was at ACFW a few times myself. So it's a good group. We also in California in Northern California was Mount Hermon up in the Redwood
Oh yeah, I've
Forest.
heard of that one.
I went there every year until we moved out here to Tennessee because I could drive there. And
Oh, nice.
I think I was there 10 years. I was going there, which is
Ooh.
how I got agented. I was agented through there as well, and then ended up with a smaller publishing. It's a long story, but smaller publisher that I didn't need an agent for. So it worked out just fine. But you learn so much, and I think God weaves your story through that. And there's a lot that you can come away with doing that. And my
Mm.
critique group, I have a critique group that we started in person up here. And then when COVID hit, we went to Zoom. And then because the two that I have left in there, that one of them dropped out, the two we have left, they homeschool their children.
Oh,
So we're just like, okay, let's just stick with Zoom. It's just easier because otherwise you're taking a half an hour each way or 45 minutes each way.
right.
We're wasting that time. And for me, it's like, I need to get as much writing time as I can in a day. So the least time I'm on the road, the happier I am.
Yes.
So this has been really good. What, is there anything else you could leave us with? Tidbit or what you hope? Do you have plans? Are you working on another book right now? Are you?
I am. I'm working on two more books, actually. I'm working on my next independent billionaire book, and I'm working on a proposal for another book for Love Inspired, featuring the brother of the heroine of The Baby's
Nice.
Christmas Blessing, because he's also a really fun guy. I think he deserves a happily ever after
That's
too.
right. Don't they all? They all deserve, they get to be real people. In fact, I had some church ladies on my last book. I had some ladies in our church that came up to me and I'm really praying for Charlie and Derek. And she goes, then I realized they're just characters. They're not real. And
Oh,
so
that's so
like,
sweet.
or I had another one come up and say, if Charlie doesn't end up with Derek at the end of this book, I am never going to speak to you again. You just get really into it where it's a real thing, so it's been fun. It's always fun to have that feedback. So
Yes.
I have a great church family where I have ladies that they'll buy every book of mine and they'll read them. And it's a joy to have people like that in your life, to have that kind
Oh,
of
how nice.
connection. Yeah. So, well, so you're doing the proposal, you're doing the billionaire book, your last book came out just this last month in August, right? September.
The end of September.
End of September. Oh, it was this coming up. Okay. So that one comes out at the end of September, and we just have to keep looking for more of your work.
Yes, hopefully the next billionaire book will be out in the spring of 2023. So
Well,
that's
and
kind of what I'm working towards.
I'll put your website in the show notes so people can reach out to you. And it's been great talking with you, Meghann. I wish you the best of luck in your books. It sounds like you've got a plan and a purpose and you're full speed ahead. So good for you.
Thank you. This has been fun.
Well, good. Thank you for joining us today. Bye.
Thank you.